It's a nice cloudy day. It just rained. There's thunder. The perfect opportunity to talk about books. I have with me 12 books that I have to make sure to read in 2025. But if I don't read the 12 books, or if I read more, it's okay. Because at the end of the day, this isn't a job for me. This is something that I want to enjoy. This is a hobby that I want to dive into. It's going to be good for me if I actually read more. So it is not a chore. I just want to be more disciplined in my reading journey. That's one thing. The second thing is I want to use the books that I have as inspiration for my own book, Where the Sun Goes After It Sets, which I will be diving more into in other videos. But you'll find that a lot of these books that I have with me, they tackle some themes that I kind of show in my books. There are also a lot of character studies in these books, so I want to make use of that for my own books. Hopefully, I don't end up just copying and pasting things into my book, but hey, that's the whole point of having drafts. I'll get to read back, see what needs changing. But above all, a lot of great authors and a lot of inspiration is here. So, before I get into this, I have a few honorable mentions that I want to get through. The first honorable mention is book 3, 4, and 5 of the Bromance Book Club, one of my favorite series so far. It's the only series of books that I've actually read. I've only read the first and second book, and the sequel, sequels usually suck compared to the first book, but the sequel to the Bromance Book Club has been just as good as the first one. The third book, excited to get into that because now it's like these characters at this point, and the writing in this book is really good. I really enjoy it. So I'm looking forward to book 3, 4, and 5 in the Bromance Book Club. I want to read Days at the Morisaki Bookshop, which is this charming story about a girl who goes and spends a summer with her uncle who owns a bookshop, and it's like the cover itself just looks cozy, and it's something that I would love to experience. I would love to work in a bookshop. It's weird how tastes change, because this was never me a while back. The Four Agreements, it is more on the spiritual side, nonfiction, so it is me trying to get into more nonfiction. I kind of have an issue with nonfiction because it's like, how much nonfiction can you read before your life starts changing? So we're in a bit of a weird phase right now, especially self-help. We're in a bit of a weird phase right now. But the Four Agreements, I'm looking forward to actually reading that. I'm actually kind of mad because we had the Four Agreements at home and then I swapped it for another book, but it's fine. Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler, which is a sci-fi book, and Octavia Butler is a legend at sci-fi. Kindred, one of my favorite books, also written by her. People seem to speak highly of Parable of the Sower, maybe a bit more than Kindred, so that's saying a lot. And I loved Kindred, so I'm looking forward to reading that. And then A Little Life, the book that everyone talks about, the book that they say will rip your heart out, you'll be crying nonstop. I want to cry, okay? If A Little Life does not make me cry, I'll be upset. So I guess either way, it'll get into my emotions. Now let's get into my list of 12 books that I really want to read in 2025. First, I have Emma by Jane Austen. I have this small little cute copy, hardcover, and this is one of those books that I'll probably carry around with me, read wherever I am. And Jane Austen is one of those like classics that people talk about a lot, and I think this book is no different. I think this is one of the most popular Jane Austen books, apart from like Pride and Prejudice. Apart from Pride and Prejudice, I think Emma is up there on that list. This is a character study of this wealthy girl who seems to just get involved in everyone's love life without actually paying attention to her own feelings. I think what makes Jane Austen such a unique author is how she manages to blend humor into these heartfelt moments, and in a way I would like to think that I'm similar in my own life and that I try to bring humor into the happiest moments or the saddest moments. So even in my own book, I would like to have a bit of that, break through like really tough, serious situations with humor, to just add a bit of depth to my characters. I've heard a lot of people say that Emma is a bit of a slow burn. I've heard people say that it's boring, that they've hated the main character. But I've learned to take reviews with a grain of salt because we all have different tastes, and I've had books that have been put off because of reviews in the past. A Little Life being one of them, actually, but I want to stop that and actually make opinions for myself because I am my own person. So, yes, book one, Emma. Book two is Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. This is one of my prescribed books from, I'd say, grade 10. So that would be 2014, almost 10 years ago. This is one of the only books that I know I enjoyed in high school. I've been meaning to get back into it. I haven't, but I do know that this is like one of the cornerstones of like African literature. It follows the story of Okonkwo, and he is an important man in the Obi tribe in the days when white men were first appearing on the scene. Achebe's very simple but excellent novels tells of the stories of the events by which Okonkwo, through his pride and his fears, becomes exiled from his tribe and returns only to be forced into the ignominy of suicide to escape the results of his rash courage against the white man. He handles the macabre with telling restraint and the pathetic without any false embarrassment. I would really like for someone to write a short description of my book in such a poignant way, because just by that alone, I'd want to read this. So, Things Fall Apart, one of the classics. Looking forward to get back into that. Next is two books by the Russian genius himself, Fyodor Dostoevsky, one being Crime and Punishment and the other being White Nights. So these are two books by Dostoevsky that people speak very, very highly of. I kind of started Crime and Punishment. I haven't gotten far in it because I think when I was reading, I just wasn't in the space to be reading. Russian literature can be a bit heavy to read, but we're grown. We should be able to handle heavy books, okay? Crime and Punishment is a bit of a heavy book. The blurb at the back says, Crime and Punishment is one of the greatest and most readable novels ever written. From the beginning, we're locked into the frenzied consciousness of Raskolnikov, who, against his better instincts, is inexorably drawn to commit a brutal double murder. From that moment on, we share his conflicting feelings of self-loathing and pride, of contempt for and need of others, and of his terrible despair and hope of redemption. And in a remarkable transformation of the detective novel, we follow his agonized efforts to probe and confront both his own motives for and the consequences of his crime. The result is a tragic novel built out of a series of supremely dramatic scenes that illuminates the eternal conflicts at the heart of human existence, most especially our desire for self-expression and self-fulfillment, as against the constraints of morality and human laws, and our agonized awareness of the world's harsh injustices and of our own mortality as against the mysteries of divine justice and immortality. This is a book that everyone says, read Crime and Punishment, read Crime and Punishment. I haven't really come across anyone who reads this book and says it's no good. So I'm looking forward to reading this. And then another book by Dostoevsky is White Nights, which is a much shorter book, and it is, I'd say, just as good. Crime and Punishment is a bit darker. It tackles very dark themes: death, crime, punishment. But White Nights is a bit softer. It's described as this melancholic book, but it's hopeful. It talks a bit about unrequited love. So it is going to be very interesting to get into that book. But yeah, this is another Dostoevsky book that I really want to get into. I also have Tolstoy's War and Peace, and I should have another Tolstoy book. I'm not too sure which one. But yeah, Russian literature is some of the best literature out there, but it is not a simple read. They're very dense books. Apparently, you will have pages and pages of just monologues by narrators. But hey, if you're trying to grow your vocabulary, if you're trying to grow your collection, broaden your mind, it would help to read such books. Next up, I have two books by another author who is absolutely adored by the book world, and that is Toni Morrison. So far, I've only read The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, and I absolutely enjoyed it. A short book. A lot of people say that they absolutely hated Pecola Breedlove. I think that was her name. Um, I wouldn't go as far as saying that she was a terrible character. I think it all comes down to what your own experience has been with race and experiencing people lighter than you. Pecola is someone who hated herself because of what was put on her, what people said to her. So, in that way, I didn't hate her as much. You kind of feel sorry for her, that she hates herself because people have made her hate herself. And I think that's the power of Toni Morrison. Her characters have so much depth. And if I could just sit down with Toni Morrison so that she can just advise me on how to write a good character, I would take that opportunity without a doubt. So the books I'd love to read by her are Beloved and Sula. I started reading Beloved, similar to Crime and Punishment, but I haven't gotten far. But there's another one of those books that everyone says you have to read. Beloved and Sula are both books that people speak highly, highly of. And Beloved is one. Let me just read the blurb. For all these books, I will read the blurb. Terrible, unspeakable things happened to Seeth at Sweet Home, the farm where she lived as a slave for so many years until she escaped to Ohio. Her new life is full of hope, but 18 years later she is still not free. Seeth's new home is not only haunted by the memories of her past, but also by the ghost of her baby, who died nameless and whose tombstone is engraved with a single word: Beloved. The first few chapters that I've read have been they've built up a world that I would really love to dive into. They've described characters that I would like to know more of. So, Beloved, 2025, need to read more of that. Then there's Sula, which is another one of those books that people speak really, really highly of. I don't really know much about it, but I know that it tackles friendship, it tackles betrayal, it tackles the complexities of being black and being a woman. Um, the friendship, betrayal, and being black are kind of topics that I'm discussing in my own book. So this is something to learn from, and hopefully I can apply a thing or two in my own book. Next up, I have one of my favorite books and one that I got very lucky to get because I got it for super, super dirt cheap. That is Alex Ferguson's My Autobiography. Huge Manchester United fan here, huge Alex Ferguson fan, so reading into this book will be amazing to get a look into the man who was so successful at my favorite club. And it will also help as we are in this difficult period at the club for me to look back at the golden ages to just help me take the blow of all these losses and draws and players being dramatic. So, my autobiography, it should keep me going for a bit as a Manchester United fan. Next up, we have East of Eden by John Steinbeck. Set in the rich farmlands of Salinas Valley, California, this powerful, often brutal novel follows the intertwined destinies of two families, the Trusks and the Hamiltons, whose generations helplessly reenacts the fall of Adam and Eve and the poisonous rivalry of Cain and Abel. Here, Steinbeck created some of his most memorable characters and explored his most enduring themes: the mystery of identity, the inexplicability of love, and the murderous consequences of love's absence. This book won the Nobel Prize in Literature, and that's saying a lot. I have read about 20 books. I've read about 20 pages so far in this book. And when they say that he created some memorable characters, I agree. Because there's been about 3 or 4 characters that have been described so far. And even the land itself has been described, and it feels like the land is one of the characters in this book. And how John Steinbeck manages to do that, I have no idea. But that's why we read, to figure out these things, and that we can make our own writing better. So, East of Eden, another book that I started, haven't finished, haven't even gotten far in it, but really looking forward to getting further in that. Next up, we have Alone with You in the Ether by Oliver Blake. This is romance at its core, okay? And I want to dive a lot more into romance in 2025 because there's something charming about a romance book. Rom-coms, I've also been watching a lot more of that. And it's not that I'm necessarily looking for love or I want to go into this ideal world of love, but it's one of those things where you you get to appreciate how someone views love and how they can make you love a relationship between two people. Because I think it's one thing speaking as siblings, it's another thing speaking as friends, but it's another thing to see two individuals speak in a romantic sense. So for me, I think since I'm writing a book where there will be a love interest, there will be relationships, there will be romance, something like this will help me understand and find out what makes a good romance story that's not just corny, cheesy, and it's like a lot of these stories that are out there. I think it's important for men, honestly, to read more books because it helps us understand emotional intimacy a bit better and the nuances of relationships, which is something that society isn't always encouraging. Like, if a man is going to read romance, it's like they'll say men used to go to war. What are they doing now? Reading romance? And it's like, you can do both. Okay? Men can go to war and read romance. There's nothing wrong with that. And at the same time, if done right, it can make men a bit more sensitive towards women and a bit more caring towards women. So hopefully, I'll get a bit of that in Alone with You in the Ether. Her writing is apparently very introspective and it's deeply moving. So can't wait to get into that. Then we have Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson. What got me interested in this book, apart from the cover, is the fact that it's written in second person. It's the only book that I've seen people enjoy that's written in second person. So we're mostly used to our first and third person narrative. Second person, it's like this, I'm talking to you. So to be able to tell a good story in that, I think it goes to show someone who is very creative in their storytelling. So that should probably bleed into the rest of the story. It's a debut novel also about love and vulnerability, black identity, the struggles of being black, which is one of the biggest themes in my own book. So reading this as someone talking to me about it, and I kind of have to transport myself into the book, might also be useful for my own book. Then we have my only nonfiction book on this list, which is Sex, Jesus, and the Conversations the Church Forgot by Mo Isom. This is a very important read for myself, for Christians alike, and I kind of read it, but I read it more so for research for my first book, With Love and Prayers. And this is exactly what I'm about. I am one of those Christians who isn't satisfied with the state of our Christianity right now because it seems like we brush a lot of topics aside that are very relevant to us today, especially as youth, and that is relationships, sex, how real Jesus really is in our life. We are focusing too far forward and focusing on the things that are yet to happen without addressing the things right now that will prepare us for that. I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm afraid that we are overlooking our struggles right now and seeing them as unimportant and focusing on other things. But there are a lot of us losing our salvation right now because we're not discussing things that we're dealing with right now, you know? So, Sex, Jesus, and the Conversations the Church Forgot, I feel like will be a very important read, not just for myself, but Christians alike. And then lastly, I have the oldest book in my collection. I got this book in 2011. This is one of the books that I received at a prize giving. This book I got, it was a prize for mathematics actually. I'd forgotten that there's a sticker in here. This is a children's story. Anthony Horowitz is a children's author, and he wrote this book as a part of a series. I don't really know what the series is called. I don't know if it's a series or if it's just a bunch of books in a collection, but it's a whole bunch of short stories written for children, but they're still really good books. They're young adult books. I think it's important to get back into books from our childhood as well, because they're obviously very simple reads, very easy reads. They're not tackling heavy themes, and I feel like they can really help you break out of a reading slump. One, and I think another thing that can really happen with these books is that it can be very nostalgic. It can take you back to a much simpler time, and it's one of the reasons why I haven't given away the whole collection, because I'm very attached to these books. As much as I haven't read them, I'm still very attached to them. The blurb here says, "On the run from murder and lies. Tudor London, mud, salt, smells, shouting crowds. Stars in this tale of a young orphan, cruelly treated and whisked off by a kindly stranger into all sorts of adventure. This is fact-tinged fiction at its gripping best." That was just a review from Mail on Sunday. So yeah, this is another one of those books that I really look forward to getting into. I have 5 other books in this collection, which hopefully I will also get through and finally complete the series that I got over 13 years ago. That's about it. That's a very quick video on the books that I'm looking forward to reading in 2025. I'm looking forward to being more disciplined, making time to read these books throughout the day, but definitely as I end off the day, I would like to read, to just close off my day. Very simple, get into a story, get in bed and sleep rather than scrolling. It'll be good to just finish off with a book at the end of the day. That's my TBR. I'd love to hear what you think about it. I'd love to get more recommendations, especially on nonfiction. If you have really good nonfiction, please leave them in the comments below. I would also love to know what you're reading in 2025. But remember, as much as we've spoken about all these books that we're trying to read, it's not a race. Reading is not a race. You don't have to read the most eloquent books. You don't have to read the biggest books or the most reviewed classics. Read what you enjoy. You need to love reading, and it will definitely become a part of your life.